Shalom and welcome to this edition of Revealing the Truth, where we cover the headlines, the heartlines, and biblical truth. I'm your host, the Reverend Rabbi Eric Walker, and we're joined today by #1 best-selling author, Dr. Jerome Corsi. He's here to talk to us about his blockbuster book, Killing the Deep State. Dr. Corsi received a PhD from Harvard University in political science in 1972. He's an investigative journalist and senior staff writer for several conservative websites. He's the co-author of the New York Times #1 best-selling Unfit for Command, author of the New York Times #1 best-selling The Abomination. Since then, he's devoted his time to writing on politics and economics, two fields in which he has considerable experience. In his career, he's written 6 New York Times best-selling nonfiction books. Dr. Corsi, welcome back to Revealing the Truth.
Rabbi, it's good to be back with you. Thank you very much.
Well, we're honored to call you friend and counselor, because I believe that not only your insights and your commentaries on a regular basis on InfoWars and the other places where you publish are so insightful. They almost have, Dr. Corsi, a prophetic tone. Your faith is something that maybe not a lot of people cover, but it's one thing that you and I have always touched on, is that the Bible and your faith is incredibly important, and you understand that as a prophet, as you begin to see things in the natural, that when you tell people about them as future events, that really puts kind of a prophetic mantle on you in some ways, and I've seen that in the course of the books we've interviewed you on, and in the course of the books you've written. Really kind of a prophetic foretelling, because many of the things you've talked about when you published this book were not happening, and right now, today, they are actually happening.
Coming from you, that means a lot to me, so thank you very much, friend. And I've professed and openly do that Jesus Christ is my Lord and Savior, and I am very committed to the Judeo-Christian tradition, the books of Moses and the New Testament are what I try to live by, and what I've always believed are the Word of God. And so these are strong. And I'm open about it. I think I've said this many times, and people can follow me also. I'm very active on Twitter.
Yes.
Jerome.Corsi, and on my YouTube channel, which is my initials JRL Corsi, JRLCORSI. I'm doing live chats on now. I've started that.
Wonderful.
And I'm finding those to be very effective. I'll do another one. I'm doing them pretty regularly, because I find they're an effective way to speak directly to people, and an effective way to really get my message out in a way that otherwise is not as easily done. People today are reading, but they're not reading as much as they used to be reading. And I think that's really one of the issues where the internet and live chats are filling a big void for a lot of people. I'm getting more proficient in the technology as we go along.
Well, you're incredibly astute in a lot of areas. The fact that you're embracing technology and realizing that the messenger needs to deliver the message directly to those that have a listening ear, that want to be able to ask you the kind of questions that we get the opportunity to ask you. But there's a populace out there that doesn't really feel that they have access to thought leaders like yourself and conservative voices who bring about this insight. Getting into Killing the Deep State, the fight to save President Trump, there's so much talk about the deep state. There's so much talk about the corruption and the almost revolutionary proportion of the divide that's happening in America today. We're looking at the same kind of organization of those that are opposed to Donald Trump, as we saw in the preparation of the Revolutionary War, of those that were believing that the colonies should be independent and come out from under the crown and put together the Revolutionary Army. We're seeing that kind of cohesiveness in an opposition to a sitting president, unparalleled in history in this openness that and transparency that we see in the Chuck Schumers, in the Robert Muellers. We see such a vitriol and such a hatred towards this president that it's almost like the deep state is fine with being the deep state.
Well, I wrote the Killing Deep State, and I think it does have a prophetic element to it. I'm beginning to realize that myself, because what I predicted would happen is happening exactly like I wrote the book, and there's more yet to happen that I wrote about. But the point is, I wrote it because it's shocking that within the Department of Justice we really had a coup d'état, a treasonous coup d'état that went all the way up to the White House and was directed by Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton. Its goal was first to prevent Donald Trump from winning the election, and then after he won the election to find a way, even though he had legitimately won the vote in the Electoral College, to find a way to remove him from office through this lying narrative of Russian collusion, which is deeply embedded in the entire Department of Justice and all the way to intelligence agencies. I mean, this deep state is pervasive throughout the bureaucracy. But the point I wanted to make was that as opposed to the colonial period, where many were yet loyal to the crown, today what we've got is a division in the country between the hard left. Democratic Party in particular has gone so far hard left that it is virtually a communist party today. And it's shocking. I never thought that would happen in my lifetime. But in the 50s, the communists said they were going to take over the Communist Party, and they've succeeded. We have, at the head of the Democratic Party, Tom Perez, who is a La Raza lawyer. Now, La Raza lawyers, for those who follow it or haven't followed it, La Raza is a very radical Hispanic group that believes large parts of the Southwest were stolen from this mythical Aztlan nation that never really existed, and they want it back. And it's a radical communist ideology, revolutionary ideology, aimed at bringing down the United States. And his partner is Keith Ellison, who we now know is a Black Panther, was in his youth, and joined the Nation of Islam. So again, this is another very radical, I would say, two communists leading the Democratic Party. And with Hillary Clinton and her campaign so far off the cliff to the left, that if she had won, we were going to have thought crimes. The deplorables, the xenophobes, all these, the LG homophobes and the thisophobe and thatophobe, we're all going to be criminals and go to Maoist cultural revolution and thought reform camps. So you've got, I think, a division between those in this country who still understand and believe. It's not being taught in our schools. This, I think, is a real tragic downfall. That American exceptionalism, the fact that we have a First Amendment that includes freedom of religion, which the left does not want. The left hates God. It's a godless, and it's turning satanic. I'm publishing on Gab a number of essays from what I'm calling a Silicon Valley Insider Anonymous, who's legitimate, and he's talking about the satanic rituals, including killing people, eating babies. I mean, it's horrific. Sexual orgies, drugs, that dominate Silicon Valley and also Hollywood and the elite around the country. It's not just Harvey Weinstein. This is a pervasive anti-God, not just atheistic, but anti-God, I think, satanic culture. And the vast majority of Americans want to have the First Amendment, the Second Amendment, the Fourth Amendment. Even the hard left doesn't mind if we have all these intelligence agencies, because they think they're only going to find conservatives and root them out because we're evil. So this is what we're going through right now is I think a classic end days battle between good and evil. And I think that what's at the heart of it, what the left hates, is, America supporting Israel. Can't stand Israel. The amount of anti-Semitism I'm getting and experiencing because I stand up and support Israel is astounding to me. And I've never seen it like this in my lifetime. The Bible says that very simple thing. It says that the Jews would return to Israel and we have Israel will be established as a Jewish state again. I think that happened in 1948. Once the Jews are back in Israel, they never leave. The Bible says very clearly, God will bless those who bless Israel, and God will not bless those who don't bless Israel. Now, I don't think there's any conditions in that. And it's not because I'm a Christian evangelical expecting that we need Israel to build a third temple for Jesus Christ to return. If Jesus Christ wants to return, he'll come back with or without me or with or without a third temple. I believe in Israel being a Jewish state for the chosen people because that's what the Bible says, period. And it's very difficult for people to accept some of these beliefs.
Yes. It's so interesting that you would point that out, because I believe that the reason why there's been a slight turn back into the favor of the conservatives in the discussion of your recommendation in your book as one of the strategies is to appoint a special counsel to investigate the special counsel. That dialogue began after it was announced that we were moving the embassy to Jerusalem. That dialogue became an earnest immediately following the dedication of the embassy in Jerusalem. And I think it's one of the reprieves that God is giving the Trump administration in allowing it, because this was on a path of destruction. They were deliberately abusing the FISA system, deliberately abusing the judiciary, abusing Jeff Sessions, who had recused himself and became basically castrated in any possibility of the Attorney General of the United States of stepping in any way, shape, or form. He eliminated himself, and I don't really understand that because it was done unbeknownst to the president. He did it independent of the president's advice or counsel, and set the tone for this runaway train that has become this broad, expanded to include everybody. Maybe even you and I at some point in time may get a phone call. That's how far afield this has gone. But it seems like people are starting to wake up. There seems to be an undercurrent, and this fourth estate is now being called out for what it is, which is the propaganda arm of the Democratic agenda. This is unparalleled in our time.
I've known Donald Trump a long time, and I think it was almost a miracle he was elected. Hillary lost a rigged election. They had millions of votes that were illegally cast. And I think we'll find this out in the Department of Homeland Security report that's forthcoming. The Democrats destroyed millions of votes that were legally cast, and they still lost. Now, what's fundamental, and I think it has to do with my beliefs of where we are as a nation, is that the necessity to repent, necessity to come back, to quit killing babies with Roe v. Wade, to quit banning God from our schools and public. These court decisions since 1948 have just been disgraceful. The First Amendment, Thomas Jefferson never wrote a wall of separation into the, that occurs in a letter that he wrote to one of the churches early on. He never didn't mean it as a, you can't have God in the public square,
Right.
Which is the way it's been interpreted. I think it's astute of you. Impeachment, and he's done that now. because the American people have realized, as I said in the book, that killing the deep state, this is a propaganda attack. There's no crime colluding with Russia. I pointed out in the book, Hillary Clinton and John Podesta were receiving millions of dollars in under-the-table payments for selling U.S. military technology to Russia under the reset, including this hypersonic technology that Russia's used to build a new nuclear weapon we can't shoot down. And yet the mainstream media couldn't care less. It's astonishing. The Democratic Party has turned against, which they embraced since the 1917 revolution, only because Russia renounced communism. The moment they did that, the Democratic Party, embracing communism, hated Russia. The Democrats are sounding like the McCarthyites of the 1950s. Russia, Russia, Russia. It's bizarre, but it shows the deep hatred Satan has, and the hard left has, and I'm increasingly pointing out to people that if the Democratic Party continues down this path, it's going to become a fringe communist-like party that will have producing homeless in the restrooms of the Starbucks all over the country, drug addicts everywhere on their streets. I mean, these are the kinds of astonishing thinking that the amoral left goes into, that they can't find an equivalence. It's equivalent to, if you have a situation in which someone has a right to be a drug addict. Well, fine, they may have a right to be a drug addict, but not in public where it's going to be a detriment to other people. And, if they want to use drugs until they kill themselves, I guess that's their choice. Intervention sometimes in these instances doesn't work. But my point is that the hard left advancing this Russian collusion lie had to be exposed. And after a year, people have realized, as I said they would in my book, and by the way, a propaganda attack, which this is, can't be answered by the truth. Donald Trump can't say, well, we didn't collude with Russia. And Mueller and the Democrats, well, that's all right. We'll find that you colluded if we just keep looking. Well, after a year, the American people are sick of them looking. And after a year, when they produced this silly indictment against 13 Russians who posted some things on the internet that, the Department of Justice Mueller never thought those Russians would be extradited to defend the case. Well, the corporations hired a lawyer, and the Russians are defending the case. The Department of Justice, Mueller now made to look like fools. First of all, Mueller indicted a Russian company that didn't exist at the time he said it committed crimes. So in the proverbial sense, he indicted a ham sandwich. And then secondly, at the hearing, Judge Friedrich was going through the discovery motions, and the defense said, we're not getting cooperation from Mueller on discovery. And this silly prosecutor, complete Trump hater, said, well, Judge, it's such a volume of material that we're having a hard time delivering it. So much of it. And the defense said, yeah, there's so much of it. Ask them if it's in English. Well, the prosecution had to admit that everything they had, or most of it, was in Russian. Well, how did posting in Russian affect a U.S. election? Even Rod Rosenstein, when he announced it, another deep state criminal, had to admit that this material did not change a single vote, and no one collaborated with these Russians. The shift is enormous. Now we've gone from Trump collaborated with Russia to steal the Democratic Party emails, which everybody knows is a lie. Anybody with half a brain knows is a lie. And now it's just they're trying to find some Russians posting things, and they'll blame that on Trump. Well, how did Trump induce anybody in Russia to post something on social media? The whole thing is so now pathetic in terms of Mueller's, that Mueller is going to be seen as having brought forward malicious prosecutions, which I believe he did to General Flynn, incompetent prosecutions, as was the case with this third, with these Russian troll farms, and also having committed prosecutorial misconduct, not following the Brady rule, not revealing to General Flynn that Strzok and McCabe altered their interrogation report of General Flynn to make it look like he lied. So in my book, I said the first phase was going to be getting rid of Mueller, and I think that's just about done. I think Mueller is just about to go, and if Mueller doesn't watch out, what I said will happen in my book will happen. That is, Mueller himself will be put under criminal investigation for his role in the cover-up in the Uranium One. Now, this I think, and I believe that Giuliani will deliver this message to Mueller, and President Trump seems, I have no proof or indication that President Trump's reading or watching what I'm tweeting or writing, but it sure seems like he is, because the messages I'm putting out, which on my Twitter are a little bit more close to what's happening right now. I mean, the book, I looked pretty far out and saw how this would end and how it would go forward. But in my tweets, I'm kind of more like giving daily guidance as to what's going to happen.
Dr. Corsi, as a minister, as the head of a Christian broadcasting network, my worldview is a biblical worldview, and I see this exposure of the pedophile rings, the exposure of the sex rings, the satanic, the Islamic influence, all these things as a counterfeit attempt at Satan's greatest tool, which is distraction. And so as long as America is distracted by these accusations against Donald Trump, nobody's going to dig into what we already have all the evidence to indict Hillary Clinton. We already have enough evidence to indict her for treason, for violation of the Patriot Act, for violation of espionage, of using unsecured facilities for the transference of classified documents. I know when I got my security clearance many years ago, the education I had to get at how to handle information was I was just afraid to communicate, and we were a defense contractor. I was afraid to communicate with the Pentagon, and they were my customer. And I actually wrote them and said, I don't know how I cannot violate all this because it's so strict, and the safekeeping and the security and all this. And I readily shared with the two-star general, I don't know that I'm that good of a record keeper and that good of a letter of the law. We're manufacturing parts for the Tomahawk cruise missile system, and I have to have access to this information. And I was a hippie, and I was a Vietnam protester. I don't know how to do this. And here you have this complete system that's completely blown open. You've got this whole situation with hiring a Pakistani national to give him access to all of Washington's secrets, and nothing's being done. We're so distracted, and this is Satan's number one tool, is to create the illusion, perpetuate the greatest lie that he doesn't exist. So this is Washington's patterning itself after the tactics of Satan in trying to establish the fact that no, none of this exists. Pay no attention to the man behind the curtain. And yourself and several others, but especially you in Killing the Deep State, have really nailed it to the wall and said, this is what is happening. And this is what we as a nation must do, and we must get behind our congressmen and our senators to support. There's a number of books out there in this genre, but what you did was you took it to where this becomes actionable intelligence, and others have not done so. Writing a book and telling me that there's a problem and what the problem is, okay, you've taken me there, you've taken me to the trough, but I can't drink. What do you want me to do about it? What can I do about it? What can our audience do about it? And this is what you've patterned in the book, and so I especially appreciated the fact that you had an action plan that said, but in the meantime, it tells us what we can do, but lack of impeachment then moves us to the possibility of this underlying theory and plausible that if there's corruption within the Secret Service and there's corruption at that highest level of protection of the president, is the president's life in danger? And is that going to be the next step if they cannot impeach him? Is that going to be the next step is to look at what happened to JFK?
Well, if you read very carefully into the book, and I'm sure you have, I discuss that, and I make it clear that I've advised President Trump not to make the mistake JFK made. And when I was 17 years old when he was killed, and my father was very involved in Democratic politics and had been working for Jack Kennedy's, labor union. They were all backing Jack Kennedy. And as a kid, I had opportunities to see Kennedy in the Senate and in person several times and watch him very carefully. Jack Kennedy made the mistake of turning against the military. When he said he was going to break up the CIA into 1,000 pieces after the Cuban Missile Crisis, he should have done it that day. You don't make that kind of a threat and then leave them around to come back at you. And not wanting to go into Vietnam. Jack Kennedy did not want to go into Vietnam. He did not go into Laos. It was a huge mistake to go into Vietnam. I've always believed that. I mean, the men and women who fought there fought with enormous patriotism.
Yes.
But it was still, I think, something we should not have done. I was against it at the time, and I thought. But I told Donald Trump basically, in the book, get close to the military, and he has. He's done everything for the military. He's giving speeches for the military and funding for the military. He's got military advisors. I think the Marines, in particular, will defend Donald Trump, and are in the process of still doing. Military intelligence, I think, is working. Especially Army military intelligence is working with Donald Trump. I was very impressed to see Admiral Rogers come out and tell Donald Trump from the NSA that he was under electronic surveillance during the transition, which Donald Trump was shocked to find out. Now, the whole nature of what's going to unfold now in this counterattack is that there's a very famous chess game played, and I've referred to it. Julian Assange was the first to use the metaphor and brought my attention to it. It was right. This chess game was played by Capablanca, a Cuban, in 1918, I believe, against a Marshal. Marshal had been trying to beat Capablanca. He played black, and he had this major initial attack, which was very brilliant. And Capablanca was totally taken back by it, by surprise, but was a skilled enough chess player that he made all the right moves to parry the attack. Well, that's Mueller doing a attempt to impeach, and it failed. Now that it failed, the pieces for Marshall were all arrayed in this attack. When it failed, Marshall didn't have a good defense, but on the contrary, Capablanca had been preparing to defend, and now those pieces were all lined up. The bishops were rightly lined up. The queen was lined up to go into a massive attack. And the counterattack, as long as Capablanca played it well, which he did, it was unstoppable. So at the end of the game, the rook is released, and I always have thought that'll be Assange with the final information, possibly Snowden and others within the intelligence community will come out and tell the American people how many laws have been violated. Now virtually everything we do is being recorded by the government, with the front end being the Facebooks and everything else that were created by the NSA and the CIA to get us to volunteer our data. So what this counterattack, as it's taking shape, is going to show how deep-seated this coup d'etat was. And we begin to find out pieces of it. The first piece that dropped was the Strozik page, and Inspector General Horowitz dropped that. Then as that expanded and we pursued that, we realized that, this FISA court approval had been given largely on the basis of this Fusion GPS dossier, which was prepared in London, paid for in part by Hillary. And Comey lied to the FISA court by omission when he didn't fully explain the document was opposition research, and had not been validated by the FBI. Then we found out the Carter page was the only one that was granted surveillance, but anybody he talked to in the campaign as collateral could become under electronic surveillance by the NSA. So then we found out, I think it has not fully yet been disclosed, but the Carter page was an FBI paid agent. It had done a similar job in 2015 for the FBI. But we do know now that spies were planted in the campaign, and these spies were actively trying to entrap Trump's campaign into statements or actions which would be the quid pro quo for getting Russia to steal the emails, which was the initial premise of the Russian collusion. And we're finding out this went all the way to the White House. Now, next week when we get the Inspector General's report, I think it will be next week, 400 pages on Hillary Clinton, it's going to be apparent to the American people. Adam Schiff can get out and lie all he wants to from the House, the Democrat of the House Intelligence Committee, who's beginning to look like a scared weasel. I mean, he's really, if this is the best the Democrats have to defend themselves, they're going to lose big. And they're going to lose big even in the midterm elections. So it's going to be apparent that Rod Rosenstein is blocking giving documents to the Congress, which would blow this case wide open. Those documents will be transferred, even if President Trump has got to declassify them all. He'll do it. And then there's no reason not to release them to the public.
Right.
And then finally, on this, we're going to find out, is this the last piece of this will be when the recognition comes that Mueller was part of the coup d'etat and was criminally involved in the coup d'etat. And a wink together with Rosenstein when Rosenstein appointed him. Mueller is worth $18 million. He had his last job at a big law firm paying him $3.5 million. He and Comey go in and out of boards, in and out of law firms. The deep state provides these jobs. Well, clearly Mueller is not going to do anything to investigate Hillary. And so when the American public realizes the corruption in the intelligence agencies, in the Justice Department, the FBI is so massive they cannot be permitted to investigate themselves, then Mueller will be fired and a new special counselor will be appointed, and Donald Trump will have no negative repercussions.
Well, it's fascinating to see this unfold. We see the complicity of Barack Obama, Loretta Lynch, Susan Rice. Jeff Sessions has been a stunning surprise, in my opinion, of unless there's something he's doing behind the scenes that nobody knows about.
Don't count on it.
Yeah, it seems like he clipped his own wings and he was fine with it. And I was a strong supporter of his when he was a senator from here in Alabama, but I have found it to be completely ineffective in advancing anything from a constitutional protective status of throwing the flag on this waste of taxpayers' money and this deliberate attempt on the President of the United States, who is, this is unprecedented. There's never been anything like this in our history that I'm aware of, where it's been so organized and so apparent that it's going on. Why is America so silent? How can people be so duped into believing that this investigation that's gone on over a year and produced not a single shred of actionable evidence whatsoever against the president or his inner circle during the campaign? Why is there no outcry? We've got homeless problems in this country. We've got poverty in this country, and these millions of dollars that are being invested in this witch hunt are being wasted. They're taxpayer dollars, and nobody seems to be up in a tizzy except for the conservative, vocal conservative voices.
Well, I think you're going to find that there's a growing awareness, and the mainstream media have been so complicit in the criminal activity and in the cover-up. I think Donald Trump's right. The Washington Post auto registers a lobbyist firm. I think Jeff Bezos is going to be shocked when the FTC, Federal Trade Commission, begins antitrust action against him, which is brewing. The entire internet is going to be. I'm running a series of articles right now, a series of for the Silicon Valley Insider, anonymous on Gab, I'm posting them on Gab, and Gab.ai, and they expose the satanic nature of Silicon Valley and the CIA-controlled nature of Silicon Valley. American people, some of these things are going to take a bit for the American people to get their minds around, but they will. And the American people who are out there who don't want their children given into Satanism and communism, we're going to next have to take back the schools. And that'll be one of the next things I'm focusing on. I'm already thinking hard about it. Pull kids out of the public schools en masse. They'll collapse. But the point is that the American people are going to get it because it's now they've listened. Okay, so like in this chess game, when Marshall had this brilliant attack. I mean, he had advanced 2 pawns, king and queen pawn, to the center of the board. It had not really been done before in a top championship chess match, and it was completely took Capablanca back. And because it hadn't been programmed and all the things you could expect to be done in a chess opening. And so at any rate, he parried it. And when it became clear that Marshall had failed, anybody looking at that board who was a chess expert knew that the game was over. Just, unless Capablanca made some huge mistake. Well, this is how I'm looking at what's going on right now in Washington, and the game is over. Democrats have lost. And as I say in the book, the third phase of this is that we will have military tribunals. And Donald Trump will bring Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama to trial for treason. Now, today, that would seem shocking to most people. Most people would say that, how could that ever happen? Many people would want it to happen, but say, well, it'll never happen. Hillary's always walked. She'll get away with it. Not this time. Because it's being presented and it will be presented, and I think Donald Trump, whom I've known for a long time, I think he's more godly today than he's ever been. I think he's come to a recognition of his role as a servant in all of this, and his role as a channel through which God can act to repair our politics. Enough people continue to repent. God will continue to act. And I think Donald Trump's support, I was shocked and always have been shocked at the way Barack Obama treated Benjamin Netanyahu. It was not only discourteous, it was outright insulting.
Yes.
Intentionally insulting. And I don't think God easily forgives that. And, Barack Obama, for all of his lies and sins and, failure to admit who he is, failure to admit what he really believes. I doubt if he's Muslim. I think his orientation culturally is Muslim. He was raised a Muslim. When he was in Cairo, I was in Israel when he was in Cairo, 2009, and he told them and the Muslim Brotherhood in Cairo in the front rows, a bunch of terrorists, that he'd experienced Islam on 3 continents. Well, that was a wink, wink. And, then at the same time, the Green Revolution was going on in Iran, in the streets protesting. During that visit, I had an opportunity to speak with President Perez, was brought into him in his hotel room. He was standing there watching the television of the Iranian protests. He asked me, he said, Dr. Corsi, do you think these protests are going to succeed? I said, unfortunately, no. I said, President Obama will not lift a voice for them. And they'll go on for a few days, and Ahmadinejad, who was then the president, will put an iron fist down, and they'll kill a bunch of them. Women, children, prison them, torture them and kill them, and it'll end. But this time around with President Trump, I think we've got an opportunity both with North Korea and with Iran to, American people are going to realize that Hillary, going back to Carter, going back to Clinton, the CIA, and the Democrats, and the deep staters, including the Bushes, were happy to have Iran and North Korea with nuclear weapons. These New World Order, maniacs thought that we could be pushed into a one world government if only there was another nuclear war. Kill some billions of people. To these New World Order people who have no value in morality whatsoever, no moral compass, human life is insignificant. Their lives are important to them. Of course, they never expect, just like the communists, Marx never expected to, the hierarchy of communism was not expected to suffer. Everybody else was proletariat. They were the elite. And that's been, to kill millions of people again. At the heart of these satanic systems, which they are, because they're predicated on atheism, that, we can be on God's throne. Well, we can't be on God's throne. No matter how brilliant we are, what kind of technology we develop, God developed what we're living in. And none of us have the capability to create that, or ever will. So these revelations are going to come forward. These revelations about the criminality of the Clintons, of the Obamas, this coup d'etat, the criminality of the Department of Justice, the evidence is going to be overwhelming, and they will not be able to hide it because it's already beginning to come out. And I see that Donald Trump, having coined Spygate, has turned the corner. He listened to what I was saying. It's a propaganda war, and he's recast the propaganda war by reframing it. In my book, I discuss a lot about reframing.
Yes.
And about how you've got to really fundamentally change the way it looks. Spygate changes the way it looks, and then people will catch on to it.
Well, once the lid's blown off of this will, Watergate will pale by comparison to this expose on the deep state and how wide a swath they've been cutting in this actual, it's burning down the house is what they want to do. Destroy the constitutional rights of Americans and take this republic and reframe this entire republic around an agenda that actually, you made an incredibly poignant statement when you talked about taking our kids out of public school. Under the Reagan administration, the first Secretary of Education was appointed, William Bennett. Bill Bennett was a fine man, but the federal government had no charter within the Constitution to go into the public education business. That was a state right, a state ruling on the local level. And he was one of the, I'm a Reagan lover, but it's one of the things that I did not agree with. And I was an educator, and I didn't agree with the federal government getting into the education business. Now we're starting to see the impact of that comparable to with this Common Core and with this brainwashing that's going on of advancing a sexual identity, non-God-based framework for everything. We're raising up a generation that the impact, if we don't get this right now, the legacy we're leaving behind is incredibly corroded, eroded, and compromised. And we're not going to have the thinkers like yourself and some of those who are coming out of the political science world as thinkers. This was, I'm a Penn State alum, and poli-sci was my heartbeat because we got to expand. It was the one area in political science you got to expand beyond the what is to what it could possibly be. And you could begin to cast into the future what and how America would be shaped. And a lot of those things have happened, a lot of those things have not happened, and we're more corrupt than we've ever been. Big Pharma is another area that it's another target on the back of the president as he's tackling institutions which have controlled and run America and the economy, but impacts every single American right in their wallet. So he's not afraid to tackle the big issues. Question for you in regards to Jeff Sessions: do you think that this will bring about a change in the Attorney General position?
Absolutely. Jeff Sessions is gone. Donald Trump's not even including him in meetings anymore. He didn't bring him down to Long Island when he talked about the MS-13. He brought Rod Rosenstein. He's certainly going to fire Rod Rosenstein. Just a matter of time, and Sessions will go with him. He'll let Sessions resign. He'll give Sessions the grace to resign.
Right.
But Sessions is cooperating with Rosenstein and not releasing these documents. And that's it for me. That was enough for me. I turned against Jeff Sessions months ago, unfortunately. And whether he's worried that he talked, he was under a criminal investigation by McCabe before he became Attorney General.
Right.
For his comments about Russia not disclosing everything when he was in his confirmation hearings. That may have frightened him. There may be something personal in his life that the FBI knows that I only suspect. And that may be the issue. But at any rate, whatever it is, Jeff Sessions has got to go.
If he goes before all this blows up, who could Donald Trump even hope to get past Senate Judiciary Committee and Senate confirmation hearings? I'd love to see a Trey Gowdy. I thought he was just an incredible bulldog. That was my hope for the pick originally.
You might put Giuliani in there. I mean, someone with the gravitas to be able to handle the issue. By the time it comes that Sessions leaves, the Democrats in Congress are going to be in such a weakened position that they're going to have to start approving judges, and they won't be able to block the people they're blocking now. The Democrats don't realize it yet, but they have no message. Every day Mueller's there, he's hurting them in terms of election possibilities. Their candidates are all extreme socialists talking as if they were conservatives. And the American people are going to reject the Democrats again. I think this will be an historically unusual year. Usually in the midterm elections, whoever is president, especially in the first term, loses seats. This time I think the Democrats are going to lose seats left and right. Nancy Pelosi, I think, has lost her mind. Adam Schiff, these people are just hard even to look at, to watch for someone like myself, because the lies. Cummings has now been compromised, and there's others who are going to be compromised when this all comes out. And the Democrats are going to look like they are, which is, basically an anti-American. They don't really believe in the Constitution anymore. They want to do more and more federal spending, spend the United States into poverty, and then we join the, borderless one world order, right, where nobody has any rights. I mean, you think the EU is going to give you any rights? You think the EU is going to allow you to pray? EU is in the process of tearing down cathedrals. They're 100-year-old structures built to glorify God, which the Europeans have turned them into movie theaters. They don't have any comprehension of what they even are. Well, the American people are not there yet. American people still fundamentally believe in God, and this new generation that we're educating, as they were brainwashed in college, will just as easily become conservatives once they realize, mommy and daddy aren't going to keep them in the basement forever. They're unemployable. They don't have the job skills. They don't have the job training. They don't have the job attitudes. They want to sit at home and play on their computers all day long and take selfies.
Dr. Corsi, we've got about 4 minutes left in this segment. I want to talk to you a little bit about QAnon, a little bit about reliable sources, on where can people go for real information. I know you are an investigative journalist, and for a long while on QAnon, you were able to decode and really bring a great deal of enlightenment to that. Recently, you've stated and I believe confirmed that it's been compromised, and that may not be the source today that it once was. I want your comments on that and where we can go to find out what's really going on. Television news, there might be a one channel, but the real truth is out there. It's just hidden in pockets, and you happen to know where some of those pockets are.
The QAnon phenomenon, I joined because I had felt that it was legitimate, and there was a military intelligence source close to General Flynn, and I had pretty. I mean, the person was identified to me. I mean, basically, I never spoke with the QAnon source or had any direct communications with them at all. Didn't want any. Didn't try to have any. But the information was of a good enough quality that it was worth decoding because it could bring people into an understanding of a deeper level of politics. And then around the 28th of April, the Post just changed their tone so radically and became socialist in nature, that no one should profit. They began attacking me for writing a book. These, I think, were just obvious. I've been studying those kinds of lines of attack since the KGB invented, in about 1958, the idea that earning a living was profiteering from somebody else's labor.
Right.
Especially if you owned the company, you're a capitalist, and that was viewed as negative. So that attack, as soon as that attack surfaced, it was clear to me that the identity had been hijacked. I think a turning point was also when Nakasone took over the NSA, military intelligence, and the decision was made enough intelligence had been shared with the American people, enough had been done to bring them into an awareness. The Q phenomenon was important through Mueller. In other words, give people a basis for understanding a deeper level of politics that were at work that would undermine Mueller, that were not apparent at the time. Now that Mueller has been so severely crippled and so clearly on his way out, as disgraced and I think under a criminal investigation himself soon, the American public don't need that level of real intelligence sharing. I mean, I do quite a bit of it on increasing amount. I've decided to do an increasing amount on Twitter. So, Jerome.Corsi in Twitter. Usually .Corsi or _Corsi will take you to most of my, social media sites. And I'm sharing more of my live chats.
Good.
Now, there are a few at YouTube, and that channel is JRLCORSI. And you can see they're all up there, and I'm trying to let them be archived and put as many on Gab as I can. I'm also posting on Gab.ai. Now, of other sites, I think the Conservative Treehouse is very good. Of course, InfoWars, WND that I did write for 12 years is very good. You can get more also on True Pundit, the Gateway Pundit. I mean, these are sites that I follow pretty regularly. They're out there. The internet you've got to search for it, but the internet is where a lot of the really good information is. I'm trying to spend a couple hours every day referencing sources and articles that I think in public source, open source, are worth sharing, and then write some tweets that share my own insight into what's going on and move the dialogue further. People are still buying and reading Killing the Deep State. It still has been done, now they're reading it for the part that we're talking about today that I wrote about, what's going to happen from here and how does it unfold.
Right.
Because my discussion of propaganda and how you deal with propaganda is, I think, the understanding of how Donald Trump is going to turn the tables. He already has, and now will proceed through the next steps in order to bring these criminals to trial. And, we do not need to be spending this kind of money. Donald Trump will take care of it next. I think his next objectives are going to be to get rid of the Federal Reserve and get rid of the income tax, get spending under control. Given enough time, Donald Trump will reverse the debt situation of the United States. can be done. And the idea that we need to spend to solve these problems is a bankrupt idea. Lyndon Johnson was all about getting Democrats buying Democrat votes with things like the Voting Rights Act. And I think African Americans and Hispanics are realizing that Donald Trump, in giving jobs and preaching families, has a much better way to go for the future than staying on the Democratic dole, which ends up in drugs and crime and broken cities, Detroit, Baltimore, etc. I'd like to see Baltimore revived, and I expect to see the African Americans in the next few years, and starting now, understand how much they've been conned by the Democratic Party and start to leave it in mass numbers. That'll mark the end of the Democratic Party.
I completely agree with you. We've been talking with Dr. Jerome Corsi, author of the New York Times best-selling book, Killing the Deep State, The Fight to Save President Trump. If you want to know what's been going on, what's been happening, how we got here, where we are, and what we can do and what we can look forward to, this is the book for you to read. Dr. Jerome Corsi, I cannot tell you how much we appreciate your friendship here with us on Revealing the Truth and the stunning contribution you continue to make on a regular basis to making America aware of what's going on with this country. Thank you so much for being with us here again on Revealing the Truth.
I'd like to end all these by saying, telling people increasingly, in the end, God wins.
Amen. Amen.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And tell people, God bless the United States, God bless Israel, and God bless you, Rabbi. Thank you.
Thank you, and God bless you, my friend. We're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we'll bring you the next edition of Revealing the Truth.